Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Early Days podcast. I'm Matt Earley. This podcast is a podcast about my life, about disability, and I guess about life in general. Each week I'll have different topics that relate to disability, relate to my life, relate to your life, life in general. So I hope that you enjoy the journey and join me on this ride of ours on the Early Days podcast. Let me just start off by giving you a little bit of an introduction of myself. My name is Matt Earley, as I said. I'm 34 as of the time of recording this first episode in January of 2019. I come from a small town in Australia, in New South Wales, called Taree, which is about a few hours north of Sydney. I was actually born in Sydney, in DY, and then moved here when I was 1. When I was born with a birth defect called spina bifida, and as a result of this, I use a wheelchair. I can't walk at all, so I use the chair all the time to get around, but I have full upper body motion, range of motion. I can use my upper body completely. It's just the lower body that was affected by the spina bifida. What else? So I went to mainstream schooling from the day I started school to the day I finished school in year 12. Didn't do too bad at school, I don't think. My favourite subject was music. I've always been into music. I started playing guitar when I was 5, I think. Started singing when I was 14, 15. And in between all that, started writing music as well. As a bit of an escape, I guess you could say. So yeah, music has always been my main passion. But after finishing school, I went to Byron Bay to the School of Audio Engineering and did an audio engineering diploma for a year. Then from there went to the Gold Coast and did an event management diploma at Ashmore TAFE there. And after that, unfortunately, ended up getting sick and had to come back to Taree. Ended up with kidney problems, and over the years had a few problems. I had a couple of stints in the local hospital and hospitals in Sydney, which I'll talk about throughout the podcast at some point. I'll touch on those. And so, yeah, because of that, I had to come home, and I was home for probably a couple of years, and then started a communications degree online through Open Universities. And then, the funny part was, in the middle of all that, I ended up going into my local radio station thinking that I would get some work doing promotions and whatnot, considering the background that I had, and ended up doing some on-air work for a few months with them. And then after leaving that particular station, I moved to another station, which I started in 2014, and I've been there ever since. I host a daily music show for 2 hours on every Tuesday and Thursday, and then on Saturday mornings I host a disability advocacy program. That's a hard one to say, and I've been doing that since, I'd say, November sometime of 2018. It's definitely at the moment my pet project. I want to get disabilities out there, and that's also why I started this podcast, to get disabilities out into the mainstream and get people thinking a bit more about disabilities and people with disabilities and our differences and our uniqueness, as well as our similarities as well. As well as the spina bifida, I also, I guess you could say suffer, or maybe it suffers from me, from depression. I have pretty bad bouts sometimes of depression where I kind of don't want to do anything, see anyone, and feel quite miserable. So yeah, I deal with that on and off, and have for probably the last 10 years. And so that's also something that we'll touch on throughout the podcast, different episodes. At the end of the podcast, I'll leave all my information, social media and whatnot, and you can find me and ask me more questions, and I can answer them in further episodes of the podcast. But today's podcast, for our first one, I'm going to talk about body image, since I think, well, for myself and people with disabilities, it's something that we deal with a bit, I think, is dealing with our body image. And I think in general it's something that a lot of people in today's society deal with the way that society is and how they make us feel about ourselves. We always have body image on our mind. I grew up in a pretty small town and was the only kid that I knew with a disability, so I always felt kind of different, and so because of that I always felt a bit strange within myself. And then seeing myself when I was a kid, I always knew that I looked different with the fact that I was in a chair, and I have a scoliosis, which is an arch in my back, so that was always something that I noticed and was definitely noticeable. So that was kind of the start of my self-esteem and body image issue, was when I noticed the curve of my spine and how different I was, and how my legs are really skinny because of the fact that I don't have any leg muscle, because of the fact that I don't ever use my legs. I'm sure we've all felt like we were a bit of an outcast when we were a kid at times, but I think I felt it a billion times more in a way, because of the fact that I literally was the only one that I knew that was in a chair, so I was quite different to everyone else that was around me at the time, which was pretty hard. And because of the way I looked, it definitely I definitely stood out in a way. The other thing was, which people couldn't see normally, but I knew they were there, and it sort of made me feel uncomfortable in myself, was the amount of scars that I have over my body from different surgeries that I've had over the years and things. That always made me feel uncomfortable. I would always have issues of going to the beach, and even going to the beach without a shirt on, things like that. That would always freak me out, because I was always freaked out that people would see the scars and probably want to throw up a little bit, because I knew that every time I saw myself I wanted to throw up a little bit, because I definitely didn't like the way I looked at all. Not even like one bit. It was bad, like really, really bad. Probably when I was up until I was probably in my mid-20s, and then it got a little bit better when I left school, probably early 20s. When I left at 19, up until the early 20s, I started to go out, see the world, and started to kind of see myself in a slightly better light, but still had those issues of seeing the chair in myself, and seeing the scars and the hunchback, and I used to joke every now and again that I was the inspiration of the Hunchback of Notre Dame, or the Beast from Beauty and the Beast. So yeah, I'd make fun of myself just because of the fact that, in a way, sometimes it's a lot easier to just make fun of yourself and joke about it than actually think and realise how bad you actually do end up feeling about yourself. Jokes do kind of mask a lot of pain in a way. Recently, though, in the last 4 years, I've started going to the gym and working out a lot, and that's definitely helped change my own mindset, my perception of the way I look, and physically has changed the way I look, obviously. So I think that's certainly been a bright spark in the last few years, probably. I think I started in 2015. So yeah, for almost the last about 4 years, it's been the thing that's kind of got me into that mindset of not having as many body image issues now that I'm starting to get the body that I felt I wanted from the beginning, with a bit of muscle tone and making people stare at me for the right reasons instead of the wrong reasons, and hoping that people maybe look at the work that I put in instead of look at the scars and the chair and the hunchback and the skinny little legs that don't do anything. And so yeah, I guess I've used the gym in a way to help myself, but also to help take the emphasis off all the bad parts and hopefully put some emphasis on the good parts to make people change their perception of the way I look, even if maybe they never had that bad perception of my looks in the first place, if that makes any sense. Even with the work that I've put in over the last 3 or 4 years, I'm still definitely not where I want to be physically or even maybe mentally, but I'm definitely each day further and further closer to being able to love who I am as in myself, love being in my own skin, and being able to be proud of the work that I've put in and the life that I've achieved. It's a work in progress, but each day we're getting there closer and closer. So in a way, I'm quite proud of the progress, but I'm also very aware that I have quite a way to go to get to where I want to get to physically and mentally. If you're someone that is growing up with a disability or some kind of a thing that I guess makes you physically different, then just know that it's not always going to be bad. Maybe, I guess when you're a kid, it definitely always seems like things are going to be a lot worse and that you are terrible and whatnot, but you do learn to eventually grow into yourself and love yourself. It takes time, practice, and standing in the mirror and going, I'm not terrible, I'm good, I'm me, I'm unique, and that's pretty cool. There's nothing wrong with being different. We're all different. It's just people with a physical disability stand out more differently or more different than everyone else, I guess. So it sort of makes us seem like we're outcasts or whatnot. I know a lot of people don't have that issue, and from the beginning